Okay, good morning to you all. It's indeed a great pleasure to see some of you again for the second time because I've met many last year at a similar session, not the same, but a similar session. And so I think it's wonderful that people from a certain discipline show interest in another discipline. Because there are things that we don't understand from other disciplines, and it's really very interesting to exchange knowledge, because when I speak, I do a lot of researching myself before speaking in front of a crowd, and also at the venue I get the chance to interact with a lot of with the audience. So it's a learning process for me as well. So I picked a very controversial, kind of a controversial topic today, the other side of men and women, something related to gender, over which we split hairs a lot, we fight a lot. It's interesting, and it's still an issue. It's involving a lot of issues that are still not being addressed. So the other side of men and women starts with a small activity, which I was intending to do today. But then I was thinking I have only 1 hour, out of which I may have to spend about 10 to 15 minutes answering questions. That leaves me with about 45 minutes. And if I ask you to draw pictures here, you would take another 10 minutes and I'll be wasting my time. So I thought I'll just share my experience with other people without asking you to do this. So something that I've done with my students and with veterinary students that I teach, the first year students, and little children, is that I ask them, I give them sheets of paper and I ask them, can you draw a scientist? And then everybody would take a couple of minutes and draw a scientist. And then say, can you draw an astronaut? And they draw astronauts. And then I ask, can you draw a doctor? I would love to see what you would draw when I ask you to draw a bunch of doctors yourself. And they draw doctors. Then I ask, can you draw a nurse? Yes, they draw nurses. And finally, just 2 months ago, I did a similar experiment with the veterinary students first year. I asked them to draw a person having a heart attack, and they drew it. I had about 100 students, and except 8 of them. All the other students drew men having heart attacks. It was clearly drawn there, men, males having heart attacks. Only 8 of them drew women having heart attacks. It gets very interesting when I give this activity to little children and ask them to draw scientists. Almost close to 100% of them draw male scientists. 100% of them draw male astronauts. And if I ask them to draw a teacher, almost 100% of them would draw female teachers, female nurses. Doctors, of course, yes, both male and female. But it's shocking. That is the reason why I thought I'll take this topic, the other side of men and women, gender. How does it affect everything around you? How long you will live, the kind of jobs you will do, what sort of housework you will do, what kind of diseases you would get, whether you would get proper treatment, depending on whether you're a man or a woman. You don't discriminate against men and women, certainly not. That's not what I'm saying. But then whether you will undergo domestic violence or not, everything is determined by gender, or at least it's a huge influencing factor. So I thought I will first let you know what gender is. And a lot of people think that gender is a synonymous to sex. And I've seen that on application forms and a lot of official documents. So they think sex is a bad word, so they'd rather replace it with gender. But gender in sociology, I have a sociological background, has a very definite and very different meaning than sex. Sex, rather, refers to the biological characters between, let's say, men and women. I'm going to add another category later on, but just for now, for starters, let's say these are the biological characters that all of you know about, starting from the chromosomes. Then we talk about the reproductive organs. Then we talk about the primary sexual characteristics, the hormones, and later in life, we talk about secondary sexual characteristics. So these are biological, these are natural, and that is sex. So if you have a certain makeup of hormones and characteristics, you call that person a female, the others would be males. But that's not gender. So it's not a synonym for sex. So depending on whether you are a male or a female, then the society starts building on that. The society starts building around it, and they have certain expectations, very different expectations from men and women. They would say, if you are a woman, you need to wear this kind of clothes. If you're a woman, you need to grow your hair. It's one of the allegations that I get a lot. Are you trying to copy men? Are you trying to challenge men because you've cut your hair? And then, well, certainly not. I lost my hair because I had dengue, that's why. And then starting from the kind of clothes you have to wear or the society expects you to wear, the kind of behavior expected out of men and women. Women are expected to do housework. Women are expected to cook. Women are expected to wash and look after the children. And that's probably the reason why if a child is not growing up very well, the society would say, oh, it's the fault of the mother. I haven't really heard the father being blamed. So that's because childcare responsibility largely falls on the shoulders of women. So it's not as simple as I make it sound. It's very, very complicated, very complex, and differs according to culture. When we go to remote areas in Sri Lanka, or India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, in Africa, Latin America, things can get really worse. So these social expectations, what society expects from men and women, you call them the social constructions around, biological characteristics around sex. They are known as gender. These two words are not the same. So if you have made that mistake of using the word gender instead of sex on an application, because when you ask for the sex on an application, what you want to get is a simple answer like male, female, other. But you can't really ask anybody's gender. That would be a stupid question. You can't really go on and ask what's your gender because there's no answer, because the answer should be a very long answer, a paragraph of I don't know how many pages, because gender means social expectations, what society has built around men and women. So what the society constructs about being a woman and a man, they give men and women very different experiences in life. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. It doesn't mean the same thing to be a man and a woman in this world. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about Sri Lanka. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about China or America. Men and women have very different experiences because of what the society expects from them. These are not natural. These things are not biological, not always. Right. So that's why we say that gender is a social construction. Before we move on to the more severe problems, I would like to say, all this time, I have been only talking about men and women. That exactly is the topic today, said the other side of men and women. But I'm making a small mistake here, I mean, deliberately, because I have only 1 hour and I cannot cover everything in this lecture. But gender is not only about men and women. As you know, there are people with a different makeup, biological makeup. They are not men, they are not women. And these people are also included in the LGBTQIA plus community. The transsexuals, the asexuals, intersexuals, and plus. We don't even know how many of them are there, how many categories are there. So gender constructions or social constructions build also around these people, not only men and women. All this time until the 21st century, I think much of the talk, much of the discussions centered or focused only on men and women. But now we have come to realize that it is not only about men and women, it's also about the LGBTQIA plus community. And there are certain expectations by the society from them as well. And when these expectations are not met, that is where we see discrimination. All right. So the expectations of people's behavior based on whether they are females or males or they belong to a different sex, these things are known as gender roles. We all play our roles like in a drama, like Shakespeare said, and the society has written the script for us. This is how a woman should behave. This is how a man should behave. And there cannot be anything else other than this binary thing. That's what the society tells us. That's why we have homophobic people. That's why we have people who hate the other sex, for example, the third sex. India, for example, has gone a step further than that. Not just India, but there are some other countries, even Pakistan and Bangladesh. They now legally recognize the third sex. So at least on application forms, it's not everything, but it's a good start. That's some point where you can start. So apart from these are lavatories, and we see male lavatory, female lavatory, and we also have a lavatory for the third sex. If we talk about the Hijra community, I'm sure you have heard about the Hijra community. One of my students is actually doing an oral presentation on the Hijra community very soon. And it's amazing how social constructions have, there's no better example to give you than about the Hijra community to talk about the power of social constructions. This has nothing to do with biology. The Hijra community, as you know, most of them belong to, they have been born with male characteristics, but they behave like females. Of course, other categories are included, but then what we have are transsexual men here. And then these people are so discriminated. They are not allowed in many jobs. Most often they're turned down. Their applications are turned down. So they have no option but to beg. So if you get onto a train in India, there'll be hijras coming to you, approaching you, asking for money. They have communities, and these entire communities are begging on trains. And these are the kind of people who crash wedding ceremonies. In India, you have long wedding ceremonies that go on for days, for weeks for that matter. So hijras just walk into weddings and demand for money and food. And people, again, it's a social construction. They believe that hijras can either bless you or curse you. So if you don't give money, people believe that they can curse you. So what they do is, oh, hijras are here. Give them something, get rid of them. They have been reduced to beggary because the society has been discriminating them. They don't want to give them jobs. Now, what is standing in their way? Their sexual orientation or their biological makeup. That's what is standing in their way. And it's a social construction. Because I don't think being a transgender woman or a transgender man affects your job. But it's the social construction that is the biggest stumbling block for them. So hijra, sometimes it is unfortunate to say, they're being refused in hospitals. So doctors, we know that medical doctors are supposed to be the most educated lot in the country, but they refuse to treat hijras. Therefore, hijras not just begin, they also are prostitutes, commercial sex workers. And one of the biggest challenges that India is now facing is how to control STDs and HIV/AIDS communicated through the hijras, because the doctors don't want to treat them. So this is how social constructions get in your way, national health policies and health of everybody. So that's the reason why I wanted to talk about this, because even though you see some of these things as interpersonal things, okay, you beat your wife at home, who cares? It's not your problem. No, these things have huge implications on entire countries, economies, and societies. Right. So how do we learn? Where did we learn all this? Where did you hear that women are there to cook? Where did you learn that women are supposed to wear pink, and boys are better off in blue? You thought it was natural. It's not. It's a social construction. And then it has been communicated to all of us. And now we worship that. We take it for granted. You think it's very, very natural for women to always wear pink. No, it's just that after our birth, we have been seeing others doing that. That's all we see. So you think it's the right thing. And this process of teaching and learning by looking at others, by undergoing punishment if you don't conform, that's called socialization in sociology. The teaching and learning process, the learning process that is there by the society. So the society gives you, teaches you how you have to perform, how you have to behave, how you have to think. Your thinking style is simply influenced by the society. It's not naturally, it's learned. So how do you teach little children? Not just by watching the little children. Yes, of course, they learn by looking at others. But think of it, when your children were born, I mean, I know there are some people who don't have children, but if you have children, if you had a girl, then you must have prepared pink clothes for the girls and blue clothes for the boys. And when you bought them toys, you must have bought dolls for girls, trucks, guns, bombs, and that sort of thing for boys. So if you're picking a present for your child's friend for his or her birthday, that's exactly the thought behind your mind. Is it a girl or a boy? That's one of the first questions you would ask. And then you would pick a gendered toy. That is why this picture you see here looks a bit odd. Because in this picture, you see the girl is playing with the truck. That's not a big problem. But you see this as a problem. What if you see your son playing with dolls? Even after you listen to this lecture, you'd be a bit disturbed, right? Even if you know, you'd be a bit disturbed if you see your son playing with a doll. So what I say is never give your girls or boys, for that matter, Barbie dolls. Because if you give your children Barbie dolls, that's an adult woman, heaven's sake. Now, why do you make your little children play with an adult woman? Barbie is an adult woman with impossible body dimensions. So I don't really remember her body dimension, but usually a woman's body is measured with the bust measurement, then the waist measurement, and the hip measurement. So scientists, medical doctors like you, they have enlarged the Barbie to reach real size dimensions. And then the doctor said, no, if this woman cannot be, Barbie can never be real, because if she ever is enlarged, she can't stand up. She doesn't have that muscle support to stand up. Her spine would be, she would not have a spine for that matter. So her bust is huge and her hip is huge and her waist is too small. And the doctors have also said she can never have children if she was ever real. In fact, that's why when Mattel, the company that made Barbie, when they first made it, it was more of an adult sex toy than a toy for children. That's what your children are now playing. And then Barbie has long blonde hair. She's white. So Barbie is also accused of propagating ethnic and racial discrimination and impossible, unrealistic beauty standards. That if you are a girl, you have to have long hair. If you are a girl, you need to be white, fair. And that's probably the reason why we are able to sell so much of fairness cream. Because in order to be beautiful, you need to be fair. And the funny thing is, India is now selling more fair and handsome than fair and lovely. That's really funny. I can't explain that using gender, but I'm taking that to in a different direction. So I'm going to stop here and come back to the topic. So if a woman is there and she needs to be beautiful, then she needs to have long hair and she needs to be fair. And if she's blonde, so much better. And those body dimensions, unrealistic. So toys. teach you gender. So when Barbie was first made, she came complete with a set of nice um, kitchen equipment, makeup. I mean, there's nothing wrong with makeup, but then again, she never came complete with a stethoscope and an astronaut suit and no, with a scientist's lab coat. She never came complete with a truck. She had her own vehicle that was also pink. And then, of course, Ken, the boyfriend, handsome boyfriend. If you want to be a complete woman, you need to have a man. That brings me to fairy tales. We make our children listen to fairy tales. We tell them fairy tales ourselves. But think of one fairy tale that we listen to as children. Me, as a child, every single fairy tale that I listened to, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Rapunzel, they all waited for a prince, for a knight to come and rescue them. They need, if not anything else, a mouse or a pumpkin to save them. Don't they have any agency of their own, women? So Rapunzel, I still think, why the hell did Rapunzel use her long hair to help a prince climb on to the tower? She could have cut it and used it to get down. But instead, she put her long hair out of the tower and helped the prince climb up on her hair and help her down. So the little fairy tales, even though we don't give a lot of thought to this, what are we telling our girls? That you need help, you're weak. That's the biggest message that we are giving. You're weak, you need help. And there are certain things that you need to do. So that's exactly what Snow White did. Clean up the dwarf's house. The poems that we listen to, what are little girls made of? Sugar and honey and that sort of thing. Media, movies, teledramas. And of course, I can't forget religious teaching here. And I'm not talking about just one religion. I'm talking about a lot of religions. And religion, mind you, is a very powerful socialization agent. You call them socialization agents. Schools, families, peer groups, religion, media, these are known as socialization agents. These are agents that help pass on these messages or teach gender roles and behaviors, expectations. So religion, when you say, okay, you are born as a woman because you have sinned, that is a powerful message that you're giving our girls. So this girl will live on her whole life thinking that you are not an important person. So if you ban a person from walking into a religious place because it's a woman, if you tell a woman that you cannot walk into a religious, let's say a temple, a church, a mosque, whatever, kovil, because you are dirty, because you pollute the place, imagine how would you feel? That you are inferior. You will live your whole life thinking that you're inferior. If you live like that, I'm not surprised that women always are submissive. Because it's in the back of their minds, they think, I'm inferior. This is my place. I have to accept it. When you grow up, that's what happens to you. In fact, formal education, I'm going to look at formal education and the impact it has in a minute. Therefore, I'm not going to explain it here at this, on this slide. Instead, I'm going to move forward. And the rest of my lecture is going to talk about gender discrimination. And I'm not calling it sex discrimination. This is gender discrimination. These are all constructed by the society. Discrimination is when a person is treated in an unequal manner by the others because of some reason. So discrimination can happen because of some race that you belong to, some ethnic group that you belong to, some religion that you follow, because of a language that you speak. There can be so many reasons. And gender happens to be one huge reason why people are being discriminated. Because you're a woman and there are certain beliefs that people have, Because of that, you can be discriminated against. That's called gender discrimination. So see, it says gender discrimination happens when a person is treated unfairly and unequally because of gender. And this can manifest, you can see gender discrimination in the form of, let's say, violence, wife beating, rape, other forms of domestic violence, then access to healthcare, access to certain other public facilities, then access to jobs. If you're being refused to be recruited in a job because you're a woman, that's gender discrimination. Then education. I will show that to you in a bit. You know what happened to Malala, because in some countries, girls can't go to schools because they are girls. It's a very clear case of gender discrimination in education. Unequal pay. Now think of your homes. Sometimes you recruit, you ask people, laborers, to come and do your garden, let's say. If you hire a man, you would pay him 2,500 per day. But if you hire a woman, you might not pay her 2,500 per day. But it's the same job, same number of hours. A very simple case that we all might know. So all of this is gender discrimination. The problem of gender discrimination is that it can happen to any one of us. It happens to men and women and people of the third sex. But then in this rhetoric, we have focused more on women and of course the third sex, because we see that women are being subjected to gender discrimination in a very disproportionate manner. That's why. That's the reason why we have a Women's Day and all that, because we see that all these bad things are happening to women in a disproportionate manner. But I will not deny the fact that gender discrimination happens to men as well. I'm going to talk about it in a bit. It happens all the time to people of the third sex. So to give you a few examples, girls have been denied nutritious food. As physicians, you know that sometimes girls, when they reach puberty, there are beliefs surrounding attainment of age, and they would say, if you just attained, age, you should be in a room for about 7 days, and then you should not feed on eggs and chicken and that sort of thing. And there are beliefs, even in Sri Lanka, that the biggest piece of meat or the egg, if there's only one egg, should go to the head of the household, who is a male, the father. While the wife might feed on the leftovers, and the daughters also might not get much. That's discrimination. That's gender discrimination. It's not biological. It doesn't have anything to do with the sex, but it has a lot to do with the social constructions around it. Education, freedom to work, not to forget the lesser pay, all that. So what if I tell you things like this? Around this world, women and girls are undergoing female genital mutilation. There's male genital mutilation as well, but I'm sure you know the difference between male and female, how extreme female genital mutilation can be. Can cause PTSD, death, broken bones, infections, hemorrhage, a lot more. The list is long. So women, would you believe that 200 million women and girls right now have undergone female genital mutilation, or FGM? Every year, 3 million girls are at risk of FGM. Then in India, we have kitchen fires that kill specifically women who could not bring enough dowry. I hope I have time to talk about these things. And then in some parts of Africa, young girls are being raped and infected with HIV/AIDS because the perpetrators believe that having sex with a virgin will cure them of the disease. That's a belief, that's a social construction. But millions of virgins are being raped in Africa because of this belief. That's why we talk about women in particular. And I don't know where to start to address this, but let's look at this in general. So I said I will talk about gender-based violence, and then I'll go on to talk about education. Gender-based violence can be multifaceted, but let me focus particularly on domestic violence. Domestic violence happens under the roof of your house, the four walls of your house. And it can happen to anybody. It can happen to the male in the family. It can happen to the females in the family. But again, disproportionately, we see that, if you look at this US statistics, women face domestic violence 6 times more than men. Men go through it as well, violence. And when I say violence, that is also multifaceted. It could be physical violence, you could be beating the person. It could be sexual violence, that is, you can rape the person or sexually molest the person. It could be psychological violence, that is, you can scold the person, yell at the person, scare the person. It could be economic and social violence. You will not allow your wife to go out and hang out with friends. You can prohibit a person, your husband, to go hang out with the friends, have a drink in the night. That's violence too. And then you could also have yelling, beating, justifying it, refusing to give money. For example, if the wife is depending on the male and say, okay, I'm going to give you money. If I give you 5,000, you're going to have to buy what is essential and bring back the balance, show me the bits. That's violence too. Sort of economic violence. So when I say gender-based violence, it's huge. I will never be able to cover this, but let's focus on domestic violence. And the sad thing is, much of this violence happens between intimate partners. Intimate partners, the people that you thought you could trust, the person you married, the person that you chose to spend the rest of your life with, the closest person. That was the person you thought you would be able to depend on at times of crisis. And hell, that person is now beating you, scolding you, belittling you. So, intimate partner violence. It is again said that around the world, 1 in every 3 women have undergone some sort of intimate partner violence sometime during their lifetime. Also at the hands of non-partners. Women in the reproductive age, again, WHO statistics, 1 in every 3 women have experienced some sort of violence at the hands of their intimate partners, reproductive age. That's almost 1/3. So that's how bad it is. So if you look at the statistics, it's scary because sometimes they say that every minute in the US, it's that bad. I just read an article by New York Times, I'm not quite sure, but it was an authentic source. They said every minute at least 20 people are undergoing violence in the USA. Every minute, both men and women. The problem with men is, okay, so this is the other side of the men. They don't report it. Women, there are so many women who don't report it either. That's one of the biggest challenges that we are facing. If you want to help them, you need to know if they are being discriminated, they are being violated, but they don't go to the police or anybody about it because of shame and all that. So with men, the problem is even worse. So in Gujarat, there has been this study, more than 50% of the men who were interviewed said that they have undergone physical violence at some point of their lives at the hands of their intimate partner, that's the woman. But they have never reported that to anybody. They don't even talk about it with other men, their friends. Why? Because of gender. Because the society expects men to be strong. And imagine if you go around telling your friends that your wife is beating you. They're going to laugh at you and they're not going to help you out. That's gender. Because the society expects men to be strong, and society, unfortunately, this is sad, expects men to be the person who is beating. That brings us to women. A disproportionately large number of women are experiencing wife beating. So I would like to refer to one of the studies done by Professor Priyanjali D'Souza, and she used a sample of 400 something, like nearly 500 medical students from the University of Colombo, and the results were shocking. A large number of medical students said that wife beating is okay. And if they justified it, saying that, okay, the husband must be beating the wife because she has done something wrong. So you don't really have to punish the husband. You don't have to arrest the husband. You know, it's only for the good of the wife that he's beating her. It actually does good to the wife. But these students also said if they ever see a woman at distress, they would help her. How contradictory is that now? They would help other women in distress, but they would not think twice before beating their own wives. And they justified it. They said it's okay. They asked for it. So this is something that cuts across levels of education. That's what I thought. This has nothing to do with level of education. Of course, economic power, education, they all play a very important role. So as you go up the ladder, if you're more educated, if you are financially stable, rates of domestic violence would go down. Yes, poverty is one major risk factor for domestic violence, but not necessarily, it's not necessarily the only reason. It's only one risk factor, that's all. That's why even in the richest and the most powerful countries, women are beaten to death by their husbands. So domestic violence, intimate partner violence, these are things, physical violence, psychological violence, sexual violence, economic and social violence, we'll never be able to finish it. So I'm moving to the next point. That's unequal access to education for girls. You can see this news clip from the Jordan Times. And it says, study highlights link between child marriage and high school dropout rates among girls. So in some countries, like I said, like in Afghanistan, girls are not supposed to go to school at all. I must say that this is a very popular attitude even among some communities, even in Sri Lanka, even in India. If you go to the plantation sector, a lot of people believe, girls, why do they have to go to school? Girls, you will have to, at the end of the day, you will have to cook and raise children anyway. So don't go to school. Wait until mother goes to the vatta and pluck tea. You stay at home, look after the younger siblings. They have lots of them, and then cook. High dropout rates of girls, especially in the rural and plantation sectors. Now, this has taken a different turn in Sri Lanka, especially after COVID and the economic crisis. There are more male dropouts, especially in the plantation sector. Do you know why? That's also because of gender beliefs and the gender expectations. Men are supposed to shoulder the economic burden of the entire family. So when the country is going through a crisis and there's no money in the house, obviously it would be the male child, the teenage boy, who will have to step out of school, go to the polar fair, Sunday fair or something, sell something, go to Colombo, find a job, and bring money home. So, you know, it has taken a total, like the tables have turned, and now we see that more boys are dropping out of school in Sri Lanka than girls. That too. So that's why I'm saying these gender constructions are not favoring anybody. They're working against girls, they're working against boys, they're working against, some of them are working against the third sex as well. Right, fine. So imagine that you have no barriers against going to schools and you go to school. Then we have another problem. I told you that schools form a very important socialization agent. In schools, they teach you the gender stereotypes, they teach you the gender roles, they teach you the gender expectations. What I have shown here is one such example. This one. I'm sure you can't, it's not very clear over there at the back. But this is something I saw at a bookshop. I visited a bookshop to buy a scrapbook for my daughter. I was looking for something. And then when I turned the pages, I saw this. It says, Tatta karana vada and Amma karana vada. Work done by a father and work done by a mother. And if you look at the work done by the father, it includes things like, okay, doing electric repairs, washing the car, changing a tire, riding a bicycle, like digging the ground, then driving a three-wheeler, doing farming, and then he's dressed up nicely with a tie and going out to work and painting the house. And then on the other side, it has Amma Karana Veda, bringing firewood, scraping coconut, bringing water, feeding the children, taking the children to school, washing the clothes, ironing the clothes, bathing the children. Can't see what this is. Okay, sewing clothes, washing the cookware, cooking, and finally cleaning the house. You actually, this is just the scrapbook. But then when my daughter was in grade 2, I saw one of the workbooks. It's a government recommended workbook. It's not a product of the government, but it's a government recommended workbook. And then during the online time, we had to help them with the homework. And then there was this activity. So she turned the page and I was shocked. In that activity, on one side, there was Amma, Tata, mother, father, big sister, elder sister, younger sister, elder brother, younger brother, and me, myself. On the other side, there was a list of tasks like sweeping, going to the boutique, cooking, making money. Now, what is my daughter going to put there? Making money. How can that be gendered? How can that be the responsibility of the mother or the father? Why should you teach these things to children? So school is one place where you teach gender roles. And therefore, as a result, sometimes the mother might even earn more than the father, but the decision-making power, the authority might lie with the male head of the household. This is a prevailing situation in a lot of countries, not just in Sri Lanka. So education itself is so gendered. And that is the reason why, like I said, when I ask little children to draw a scientist, it's very, very likely that nearly 100% of them would draw a man in a lab coat. So girls would give up and they would, by the time they reach secondary school, most of the girls would have lost inspiration, aspiration for jobs. And they would say, girls are in jobs like teaching, nursing. Oh, it's pretty easy so that you can juggle both housework because you're a woman. And that's something that you can't escape. So if you become a teacher, maybe you can juggle both. Doesn't involve a lot of traveling and all that. So what are you doing? You are narrowing down and limiting the aspirations, the opportunities available for women. Nip it in the bud in their childhood so that you would stop aspiring. Not because they cannot do it, because the society has said, you stop there. That's your limit. We'll go to the next point, unpaid work of women. I'm talking about household work. if you like, this is something that everybody accepts. Imagine, got a lot of males here. Somebody is doing the housework at home. Somebody's cooking, somebody's washing, somebody's keeping the house clean, somebody is attending to the children. You have to pick them up from school, drop them in school, look after their homework, do marketing, lots of work. Oh, that's not important. You are able to come here and spend the whole day here helping out masses because somebody is doing all that back at home. So that's what Karl Marx said. Capitalism is run on the shoulders of women. They're not charging any money to do this, because if you hired a servant, a maid to do all that, sometimes perhaps you might have to do another job to pay her. So what if we all women get together and say, from tomorrow, we are going to charge money for all the work that we do? Because that should have been the thing. Is if you add an economic value. Now, this is work that has some economic value. That is the reason why if you hire a maid, you're paying her. You have to pay for her meals, you have to give her accommodation, plus give her money for the work she's doing. So if you had to do that, if you add this real economic value that this work deserves, that we very conveniently neglect, if you add an economic value to it, it says that women's unpaid work totals 10 trillion US dollars per year. 10 trillion. And we have very conveniently left it out of the GDP as well, the gross domestic product. I mean, we calculate every other thing, like all the goods produced and all the services given, but you have very conveniently left out the household work, because whether you pay them or not, they are getting done anyway. You take it for granted. So you leave it out of the GDP. But if you add that to the GDP with a real economic value, then per year, the world GDP would have to go up by $10 trillion. It's US dollars. So that's what Iceland once did. Now, this concept called the Long Friday in Iceland in the 1970s, in the women's year, 1974 or 76, I don't remember, but Iceland, suddenly all 90% of Icelandic women said on a Friday, we're not going to do an inkling of work today. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to do any cooking. We're not washing. We're not going to look after the children. We are not going to school. We're not going to offices. You men do it. Try it. 90% of Icelandic women participated in this. And that was the worst day in history for Iceland. Supermarkets sold out of sausages because that was the easiest instant thing they could do. And then supermarkets also sold out of candy, chocolate, because the men had to bribe the children to behave. And at the end of the day, they got so fed up and said, please, can't do this. Today, Iceland has one of the most gender equal parliaments in the world. Gender equality is so good in Iceland. And it is one of the best countries, one of the best 5 countries, or rather the best country for a working woman. But my problem is, there is no such thing as a woman who doesn't work. There's only a woman who is not paid for the work. That's my problem. Every woman is working. It's just that for the work she's performing at home, nobody's paying her. So look at the women who come here and work. Now we got some ladies here. So they are working here for a pay, and her day is not finished when she goes home. If I ask you ladies, do you go home and put your legs up, have a nice cup of coffee and go to sleep? Is that how your day goes? Probably not. And then she so you finish your work here, you go home and you do more, you cook, you wash, you look after the children. So even if you hire a maid, so research has shown that even if you hire a maid, there's still some work left, some work left. And still women around the world would spend 3 to 6 hours doing unpaid domestic work compared to 30 minutes to 2 hours of men doing the same kind of work. So a disproportionate amount of unpaid work. And then the reason why I put the word invisible here is that nobody can see that. The funny thing about housework is that they're the kind of work that nobody will see if you do them, but everybody will see if you don't do them. That's the reason why there's this funny story. And in the story goes, there's this husband, the wife is not going out to work for a pay, she's a housewife. So the husband is going out and working, he's making money. So then the husband is asking, what are you doing every day? Like, see, I'm very tired. I go out, I work. I'm the one who brings money home. What do? You don't do anything now. You stay at home. You're a stay-at-home woman. So she didn't say anything. She just stayed there. Then that evening, when the husband came home, he saw that the gate was wide open. The children were here and there. They were playing in the mud, and the sprinkler was working. And then all the lights were on when he went in. And when he walked into the kitchen, nothing was done. The dishes were not done. She has not cooked for the day. And the television was on, the radio was on, the AC was on. So he got so angry. When he walked into the room, he saw her on the bed reading a book with her legs up on the book on the bed. What are you doing? He asked. She said, well, you just asked me what I am doing at home. You told me that I don't do anything. You practically asked me, what do you do? What I do, I usually do because you asked. I didn't do that. So that's why Karl Marx says that capitalism runs on women. So for the men to go and work in the factories, for everybody else to go out and study, go to school, women create the platform for absolutely no pay. And it's invisible. Women, when you say, okay, women can do anything, just go from home, leave the private sphere and go to the public sphere, go out and work. I'm really scared when I say that, because that doubles the workload of the women, because just because she goes out and works just as much as the men, it doesn't reduce her share at home. It only doubles her workload. That's what we call the second shift. Okay, so that's the last point here. And child marriages, I briefly alluded to it. It's 12:30. We started a bit late. What are we going to do? Should I? Okay, I'll make it as quick as possible. Just child marriages, as I say. You see a little girl sitting here, and if you read this, it's appalling. In many countries, there are children who get married to very, very old men. This, of course, affects both male children and female children. But it is said that girl children are affected 6 times more than boy children. So male grooms are also there, child grooms are also there. But compared to about 100 million male children, there are about 600 million girl brides. This affects girls more. In a lot of countries like, surprise, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, we see very, very young children, as young as 10 or 7 or 12, getting married. I've seen photographs where girls are given away in marriage to men as old as 70 or 77, 80, because of economic deprivation, because of poverty. Their families practically sell these children in exchange for cows, money, because of an agreement they have had with the man, because the family is in debt. Imagine the plight of these girls. Perhaps as medical doctors, you might have to deal with such cases where there's a girl, she herself is a child, and now she is pregnant. Not with just one child, but she will continue to have so many children. She has no idea about nutrition, no idea about vaccination, no idea about education, because she herself couldn't go to school. Imagine yourself in a country like this, having to serve these people. And then female genital mutilation. Female genital mutilation, again, is a serious problem. And like I said, there are nearly 200 million children. So this is something that can happen to a child between maybe infancy and about 15 years of age. Sometimes in some cultures, this may happen right before marriage. Again, this is something that affects women disproportionately. So there's this cultural belief that women are promiscuous, that women go around, having sex with men. So if a man has an affair or something, it's probably the fault of the other woman. So you need to restrain the women. And how do you do it? One of the strategies would be to cut off her genitalia. So this happens a lot. Female genital mutilation happens a lot in African countries and some Middle Eastern countries. And there are 4 types. I don't know if you learn about all this in medical, but then there are 4 types, and some of the one type is really, really horrendous, where you cut off all of your external genitalia, and then you leave a small hole just to pass menstrual blood, and you plug up what is left in the wound with something like maybe dough, honey, some sap. And as you know, this is not performed by professionals like you. These are performed by bush doctors using razors, pieces of glass, knives. Usually the child is held on to by people, otherwise because it's traumatizing pain. So they would just, and there are accounts of little children breaking their limbs because of the pressure, because the adults have been holding on to the child, press the child onto the ground and hold on. So then you just cut off the genitalia and tie up the thighs and the legs with some rope and leave the child maybe up to 7 days for the wounds to heal. And in her first intercourse, penetration, sometimes you need medical assistance to open up, like an episiotomy or something, for the first penetration. And every time the woman has a child, imagine, usually ends up in death. And then if you inquire about the reasons, now I'm not talking about quantitative research methods. It's very difficult to do some research in social sciences, only depending on questionnaires and trying to count the number of heads. So if you look at the qualitative information, the reasons why they perform is, number one, because of religious beliefs. They think that women are promiscuous and they have to be kept in their places. So if you cut off all the external genitalia, they will simply refrain from having sex because there is no pleasure in it, or they can't have sex for that matter. And then number two, because this is for also aesthetic reasons, so that the woman would look beautiful in that area, for eye candy for the males. There are so many cultural beliefs around this that one of the reasons you wouldn't believe is that it shows love for your child. Parents have to do it because it's one way of showing love to the child. So if that is put into your head and you're brought up seeing everybody getting mutilated, and you think that's the right way to behave, there are people like that. This is the shocking part. No amount of education can take those beliefs away, because there are, in very recently, I read an article on BMJ, and they talked about how professional educated people who have moved to the UK, they would try to go to hospitals and get their girls mutilated, and the doctors obviously would refuse to do that. So they would either buy a ticket and go back to Africa to get it done by a bush doctor, or there would be a communal mutilation festival ceremony or something, and they would fly the bush doctor to UK. They would buy the ticket and bring the bush doctor to the UK or the USA just to perform this. Power of beliefs. It's very difficult to fight them. And then I'll leave it at that, because there's no end to these stories, and I can't discuss everything in a few minutes. But I would like to wind up with this. This world that we live in is a world designed for men, in the words of Caroline Criado Perez. She is a British feminist with an economics background, rather. So she says she has written this amazing book called Invisible Women, Data Biases in a World Made for Men, Designed for Men. And in this book, Perez talks about how every single policy has been designed with the male default. The male standard is considered the universal standard. And women's needs, women's opinions have been totally ignored. Not necessarily, it's not that, please don't misunderstand here. We're not saying that men deliberately want to do bad things to women. It's certainly not the case. It's just that they don't know it either. That's how they were socialized as well. It's just that it's taken for granted. That is why I asked that question. This is what I was going to do. If you Google a person, this is a real Google search that I took a screenshot of. I did this Google search. If you search a person having a heart attack, look at the results. Images search karotte hema. Meke dekada koida tiyena gano roopa. Anik okkoma males. That's exactly what the veterinary students drew as well. Out of about 100 students, only 8 drew women having heart attacks. You know, the irony of this is that cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death in women worldwide. It's just that the symptoms can be different. But then you would go for looking for the Hollywood heart attack here. And then women complaining of certain other symptoms might be overlooked. This has a name. This is called the Yentl syndrome. In sociology and economics, we study about the Yentl syndrome, a condition in which women are misdiagnosed or treated poorly unless symptoms or disease conform to that of men. So some symptoms can differ from that of men. Women's symptoms can differ. Some drugs may answer men and women differently. Some drugs might not work on women at all. I don't know. You tell me, you're the doctors. But this is what I have read. And then the problem here is that we are looking for the universal male symptoms. They're taken as the standards so that some women, so why on earth otherwise? Heart attacks worldwide, women's leading cause of death. But if you do a Google search, you get all men. People draw men. And then masks. One size face masks do not fit all, especially women. I guess I can ask the same questions from the ladies here. Think about your PPE. Does it fit you? How can there be unisex clothes? Because your bodies are not unisex. We have female bodies and male bodies. I mean, I get the same feeling when I go to walk into a shop to buy a dress and they say, Madam, woke a free size. How can it be free size? I mean, there are different shapes no, and sizes. So there cannot be anything like free size. Same goes for the mask because the facial dimensions are significantly different. Same goes for the mobile phone. Mobile phones, they say, are designed for male hands because when they took hand dimensions, they have never taken female hand dimensions. Even when they made car crash dummies, until very recently, no car company made a female car crash dummy. So we are driving cars made for men, and when we meet with accidents, they say women can't drive. And that's not exactly what has happened here. So this is a world designed for men. That's why I've put here face masks, PPE, mobile phones, car crash dummies, and even astronaut suits. So this is a real example from NASA that Caroline Perez is talking about. She said that NASA, they're the people who send astronauts to the space. So they wanted to cut down on the costs. They maybe ran out of money, so their budget was short. So they wanted to cut down on the clothes, and they said, do something about it. We are making too many astronaut suits. And you know what they cut down on? The small size. And the small size is exclusively worn by women. So very conveniently, you can cut down on producing the small size. So that, you wear the medium, next size. But the medium would be too large for women. So imagine your lab coat getting caught in the fire, and you know when you get onto the space ship, your something would get caught in the door or something. That is because the clothes, the mask. So this is something that I read during Corona. When your clothes don't fit you, it increases your risk of infection. So female healthcare workers are at greater risk. So even this huge, I think you had seen this, when Apple came up with this new model, there was a lot of ha-ho against it because it was not meant for the hands. Hand dimensions are smaller in women, but they never considered it. But a majority of iPhone users are also women. Right. Because I'm running out of time very quickly, maybe I should stop. And maybe I can take a few questions. Is that okay?
Thank you, Dr. Poornika, for that brilliant talk as expected. The eye-opener to many of us. There's no gainsaying that gender-based discrimination abhorrent, to say the least. But I just want to ask whether there can be a biological predisposition for this. Now, Homo sapiens has been more than hundreds of thousands of years and hunter-gatherer society. Okay, communities may be more. So in those hunter-gatherer societies, men played a different role, women played a different role. So that can make, I of course agree that discrimination should be stopped. That would have predisposed humans to develop these attitudes.
In fact, thank you, sir, for that question. It's more of a comment than a question because I agree with you. So that predisposition must have been there. So I totally agree with you. But then what happens is that people have built on them, on and on them so much that it has reached a certain level that we cannot handle it anymore. This has turned into such a lot of discrimination. So let me add a little bit of, I agree with you there. Now, says several decades ago, again, this was in Perez's book. She says that somewhere in Europe, they unearthed a skeleton of a Viking. And then it's a skeleton and the pelvic bones were clearly female. But then for decades, until 2017, archaeologists refused to accept that it was female. And then you know the reason why? Because the skeleton was buried along with a sacrificial horse and a full set of weapons. So they believed, women cannot be warriors, women cannot be hunters, in spite of the fact that we have heard so much about bold and brave women warriors, even among the Vikings. They are invincible. Ganu warriors even though it was a fact, they refused to accept that it was a female skeleton. Finally, in 2017, they did a DNA test and found out, and then finally they gave up, okay, fine, it's female. So, see, there must have been some predisposition. But look at what we have built on it. And it has reached beyond a simple division of labor into discrimination. So it is not a simple division of labor for convenience to get the job done. But we have created this into a system where one group of people can be discriminated against. So that's where the problem is. But you're absolutely right.
A question now. The discrimination occurred because humans evolved into class societies. Now, say in primitive society, do you think this discrimination prevailed? Very primitive societies in Africa, or this happened because of the generation of classes in society?
Oh, well, again, another brilliant question. I would say class is one, like you said, there have been primitive societies. I don't like the word very much, but let's say pre-communist societies and communist societies where there's been, communal ownership of assets, economic assets. And that is one way that these people stratified the society. But gender division of labor, I believe, still existed. That's exactly what we were talking about in the previous question. So I would say these are parallel stratification systems. Class system is one. So even when there was communism, when there was communal ownership of economic assets, there was still some gender division of labor, but it was minimal. Because now there are feminists who say that capitalism, birth of the capitalism is the reason why gender discrimination appeared, like you said. But then what I have seen, what I have observed, from what I've read, no, some gender division of labor was there. Not necessarily discrimination, may not have gone to that extent, I don't know. But there has been some division or other. So I think as human beings, we always try to divide. Maybe along lines of class, maybe along lines of caste, maybe along lines of ethnicity or race or what, nationality, level of education. And gender now also happens to be one of them. So, but right now, if you look at it from the contemporary point of view, I would say gender discrimination cuts across all of the other stratification systems. So that means whether you are a rich woman or a poor woman, you will be facing some form of discrimination or other. They may not be the same form of discrimination. So poor women might have a lot of domestic violence and economic deprivation and that sort of discrimination. But if you are a rich woman in a very rich class, you would have different sorts of discrimination happening. But gender discrimination is there. So if you look at religion,
gender division or gender discrimination is in religion also. If you look at caste, if you look at race, every other stratification system compounds on it. So it's very difficult for some women. Imagine being a black poor woman in the USA. Black, it's racial. Poor, that's class, and a woman. All these factors are going to affect her. So a white poor woman situation would be slightly different. Then a white rich woman would be slightly different, but discrimination is there.